Look, it's no secret that Mario Wonder definitely lacks in the boss battle department, considering the fact that 4 of the bosses within the entire game are Bowser Jr. boss fights that are very basic, and the 5th one being the final boss against Bowser. It's really confusing that we have a game that actually has a really cool mechanic such as the Wonder events that can transform the characters and the enemies and the stage itself. It's kind of mind-boggling to me that this didn't affect the boss battles in any way. So I already made a video talking about what if the Koopalings were in Mario Wonder, but today I'm going to be talking about what if we had original boss battles in Mario Wonder as well. What would they look like? How would they work? Well, before we dive into it, make sure you leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed today's video. Let's see how many people we can get to like and subscribe this one video before the weekend, but let's dive into what original boss battles could look like in Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Basically, all my inspiration for these bosses in this video are going to be taking an enemy from the game and kind of turning them into a boss. Very similar to that of Yoshi's Island. Considering the fact that we have Kamek in this game and he does nothing besides bring in some airships, it'd be really cool to see Kamek fly across the stage and actually chain some of these enemies and turn them into big boss battles. Or honestly, you don't even need Kamek. You could just have the Wonder Flower do it. Maybe an enemy grabs a Wonder Flower and transforms right in front of you, or transforms the whole landscape around you, including you and the enemy, in order to make a really fun boss battle all around. Pretty much, I'm going to go through each area and tell you what enemies would be turned into bosses and how they would actually work. And starting with Pipe Rock Plateau, it really is kind of crazy that this whole game is based around piranha plants and flowers. It's the Flower Kingdom. How in the world is there not a flower boss battle in any sort? Like no piranha plant boss battle or anything like that. Especially since there's a whole stage dedicated to them. I would have loved to have like the little musical play out, and at the very end, Petey Piranha came out. And we actually got to fight Petey Piranha. Would have been really cool with a whole bunch of piranha plants going back and forth as well. We've already had Petey Piranha as a 2D boss fight in New Super Mario Bros. For the DS. So seeing him return and actually fight you for a little bit as he sings would be so cool. You could also see a fun boss battle against a giant Skedaddle, or maybe like a King Skedaddle, where you're chasing him through like a little level and you have to catch up to him in order to hit him 3 times until eventually the boss is dead. This would be kind of like the Wiggler races, where you're just racing along a giant horizontal stage until he runs into a wall, but you'll keep dodging enemies and dodging his giant seeds that he'll shoot at you until you bounce off of his head 3 times. And a really good one for Pipe Rock Plateau would be a giant bull rush. Imagine a giant bull rush trying to take you out, and you have to keep leading it to slam into a certain wall in order to knock it out and actually deal damage to it. That would be really cool. At the very beginning of the game, it would be a very basic boss where he just, tries to chase after you and you have to lead him into a specific spiked wall or something for it to deal damage to him. That would have been cool to start the game with. Next up, we move on to the Fluff Puff Peaks, where one that just pops up in my head immediately is the Outmaways. They would make for a really amazing boss fight. Imagine if there was like 3 different ones stacked up on top of each other, and you had to take out each individual one, but maybe they were giant or something like that, and they were all kicking things at you. I remember the boss battles from Tropical Freeze with the Polar Bear, and also from Yoshi's Woolly World with the giant Sniffet that does pretty much the same exact thing, that kicks these giant ice blocks at you and you have to dodge them. It'd be something like that where you have to jump over stacks of them, or maybe even spiked balls or something that they would kick at you, and just different obstacles, and eventually maybe you would have to grab one of the things that it kicks at you and kick it back. Or maybe one of the ice blocks holds a shell that you have to break with the ground pound and then throw the shell at them. Something like that would have been really cool. You also have the brand new Pokepedes, where they have like all these helmets on the segments of their body as they're punching through this line, and you have to jump on the tail end of them in order to defeat them. I would love to see a gigantic one where maybe different segments of his body is sticking out and you have to hit each one in order to end that phase. That would be really cool, and it was just like a giant maze that they're punching through that you have to get through, and each time that you hit them, you'll move a lot faster. And I thought maybe even the Condarts could make for a good boss battle. Maybe it was like a mother Condart and there's a whole bunch of little ones flying around it, and they keep charging at you, or you have to make a path with them as they charge into the ground, or jump off of them once they charge into a wall or something in order to reach the mother in the air. Would have been really cool. Or maybe she just moves back and forth, eventually charges at you herself, and it's just a simple boss battle where you wait for her to charge, stick into the ground, and then attack her. Or you have to lead her to stick into a portion of the ground that she can only stick in. Maybe the rest of the ground is like metal or something, and you have to have her stick into like the snow portion of the ground in order to stick. Would be really cool, and then you get to attack. Shoot, they could have even implemented the Wonder event where you're running on the back wall in order to get through like a little maze of con darts and then eventually jump off the back wall in order to go back into 2D section where you then have to jump on the mother con dart, and it just keeps repeating through that. Would have been really cool. Next up we have Shining Falls, and this one has some really fun unique enemies like the Hoppy Cats, which actually is a wonder event where you get some giant versions of the Hoppy Cats which still jump when you jump. But could you imagine like a battle against a gigantic one, like a king one or something like that, where you're a Hoppy Cat transformation and you're going against them as well, where maybe you have to jump first, let them jump as well, and then like hit underneath them or something in order to hit like a weak spot. Would have been really cool. Or maybe a segment where you guys are flying vertical in the air really high and you're trying to reach the end or something, and then if you reach it before him, you know, it blows him up or something, or you'll hit a switch or something like that. It could have been a basic boss battle, but one that was still fun to play against. You could have one against a giant anglefish where some just kind of shoot at you and then there's one giant one that pops up that you get to bounce off of, or maybe you have to bounce off of a whole bunch of little ones in order to reach the big one that's going to fly above you at the top or something. I don't know, they could have made something out of that. Maybe one against a King Smorgan. We've seen some of these Smorgan clouds over and over again, but really nothing came of them. They're just kind of floating there and just in your way. But I would have loved to see like maybe a giant thundercloud version where you're on those rails and you have to race with it or something and make your way to him in order to jump off his head by, you know, riding the rails and jumping off of them at the right time, or like dangling from the top one and landing on his head as he gets below you. Would have been really cool in order to hit him 3 times using the rails against these giant cloud enemies. Some big desert, I could think of at least a couple that would have made sense, like the Mumsy. What if there was a giant tall Mumsy, like a wonder event where the Mumsy goes super high and you have to find ways to get to his cord in order to pull him 3 times. Each time will slowly unravel or something, or what they could do is just have one giant unravel where you have to keep unraveling him by moving along the stage and finding platforms to climb up and to keep pulling the cord as far as you possibly can. And you have to dodge other enemies and stuff within the stage. It'll be just one giant Mumsy that you have to unravel. Or maybe each time you unravel him all the way, you have to jump on his head, and then it rinse and repeats 3 times. There was a lot you could do with this one enemy. And you also have the Shova, which is a new type of sumo bro, which would have been really cool if there was like one giant one. I'm surprised the Wonder event didn't do that for the Bowser statue push thing. It would have made sense if they just would have made him huge or something, or like a King Shova, where you had to like push things back at him or something, or push things around in order to climb up and hit him in the head. I don't know, they could have came up with a cool boss battle when it comes to pushing things around, like pushing the pipes or something, but, you know, of course, they didn't. The Fungi Mines has some pretty good ones, starting off with the Takibo. I believe it's pronounced Takibo, something like that, but they're like these giant bamboo stalks that kind of raise up into the sky, and once again, you could have like a king one that's super tall, and you have to keep breaking them down by climbing up to the top of something and taking out pieces of him, and every time you take out a piece, they'll get up and chase you or something like that. That would be really cool until you can break it all the way down to the bottom, and no, it wouldn't let you ground pound it. And imagine if the very last piece had a metal top where you couldn't hit it from the top, so you had to take one of its segments and throw it at the side in order to deal one of the damage phases and rinse and repeat 3 times. I'm like, come on, Nintendo. I think they could have made a boss battle off of the tailies. Maybe you have to swing off of tons of little ones in order to reach the big one, and when you grab the big one, just like the Mumsies, you actually have to grab it and pull it and hang on for a while and then pull it down to drop it from the ceiling, causing it crashing down and sticking in the ground, allowing you to jump off of the butt of it. That would be really cool. And like, yeah, just climbing up and platforming off the little ones in order to reach the big one and pull its cord down each time would have been really cool. And shoot, there could be a really cool Wubba one where there's a King Wubba or some type of golden Wubba that's swimming through this Wubba goo, and you have to swim through in order to chase it, or maybe you are a Wubba as well, and you're just chasing him around a giant maze trying to trap him, and maybe you have to cause a conch to come down and slam on top of him by trapping him in a corner. Would have been awesome. That way it had you transformed into a Wubba chasing another Wubba. It'd have been a really cool Wonder event, and I think a lot of people would have had fun with a boss battle like this. Then we move on to the deep Magma Bog, and there's a lot of good ones that they could have used here. Imagine a battle against a giant Rumba, where you are a spiked ball from the Wonder Flower event and you're chasing after the Wumba, and you have to corner it down after doing all these tricks and flying through this maze and then ram into it with your spiked ball, and you have to do this 3 times. Would have been fun. They could have had a boss battle against a giant Rarg, where maybe you picked up pots of water and you had to hit him with pots of water as he flew back and forth or came out of the ground or the ceiling. Would have been cool. You could have another wind-up style of enemy with the Revner, which is like a dry bones with a cord that you can pull, and maybe you have to get to the end of a cord from a gigantic one. You have to jump over him and grab his cord in order to have him slam into a wall and break break apart, and maybe you will jump on his head while it's on the ground or something, and you do that 3 times would have been cool to see. What's funny is we actually got a giant spike statue, so taking one of the fire spikes and making them a king or something and putting them in the statue would have been cool. Like when he's shooting all these lava rocks at you, maybe at the end of a phase, eventually the statue will break down, the fire spike will jump out of his mouth ready to attack you, or maybe pop out of one of the fireballs that he shoots at you, and then you had to jump on his head. He'll jump back in the statue for phase 2 and keep shooting things at you. Like, they literally had a boss battle right there they could have implemented, but instead it was just a super short wonder event. The Petal Isles was also a location that could have had tons of enemies be bosses as well. I mean, you literally had a wonder event once again of a giant smackerel that could have been a boss battle. Maybe you had to lead him in order to bite a giant bomb or something outside of the water, or just lead him into his own demise. It would have been a short boss battle, but an earlier one in the game that still would have been fun. You could have had a giant bluebird that flew around the cave and shot giant spikes at you that would eventually build a path for you to hurry up and climb up before they all disappear in order to jump off of his head. Or maybe it was just him shooting giant spikes at you from the top while the babies were shooting platforms for you to climb up and hit it. You could have had a giant version of this Chin Anago enemy, which is a like giant underwater pokey, which maybe it had a weak spot on its head. It would come out of different pipes, kind of like the whack-a-mole where you had to guess the right pipe it came out of and then jump on his head. And just like the smackerel, you have a wonder event with a giant conch. It would have been cool if there was like 3 different phases where you had to get to the bottom of each one, and as you progress, the second one will be harder, the third one will be the hardest, and yeah, it'd be the exact same thing, but just maybe 3 different rooms of this would have been cool, and actually like a proper boss battle, you know, feel to it. You have a wonder event where tons of Gnashers are trying to eat you. You could have one giant Gnasher where you have to lead it into biting like a really hard brick in order for it to stun and then jump on his head, or maybe throw a POW block at him. Or maybe there's a giant Maw where you have to throw like bombs in his mouth or something in order to detonate and blow him over so that way you can jump off of his head. Or maybe you're a Goomba and you have to sneak past a whole bunch of its babies in order to get to the Mama Maw and jump on her head at the very end of the obstacle course or something would have been cool. So the airships also don't really have boss battles besides this Mecha Bowser machine at the very end, but one thing you could have done was utilize those little firework enemies and shot up in the air in order to hit a boss or something like that. Like the giant Bowser statue head that flies around during the wonder events on these airship levels would have been really cool to take these guys and shoot fireworks up in order to aim and hit them on the head when he flew closer to you from the background. Or you could have used the fireworks to maybe take out Kamek. Maybe Kamek was a boss battle where he will fly back and forth a lot, and you would have to use this little firework in order to knock him out of the sky as he's flying across the screen in order to knock him down and then jump off of his head. Would have been so cool. I mean, like, there's so much possibility with just some of these enemies as well. And oh my goodness, don't get me started on the Bowser machine. All you have to do is dodge like 2 pillars and then a couple of enemies, and then you'll hit a switch and then it's done. It would have been cool if you had to actually like chuck the bombs into its mouth in order to detonate it 3 times, and each time the conveyor belt would move faster and back and forth, and maybe the, you know, giant pistons would slam a lot faster as well, and maybe even the machine could do things like breathe fire. And then eventually, after you throw 3 bombs in its mouth, the switch will become available, allowing you to hit it. It would be just that simple just to make a more interesting boss battle out of this thing. And then you have Bowser's Castle, which of course is the final boss, so you don't really need to add any bosses. If they did, it should have been like Kamek or something. And most of the enemies were new bullet bill types. So there could have been some type of machine that shot these 3 different types of bullet bills at you, maybe like one of each phase, like the first one being Missile Megs, which you had to climb all the way to the top in order to hit it. You have the Seeker bills, which you probably would have to have them latch to the ground in order for you to jump off of it and then reach the top of the robot. And then you have the Dragon bills, which would have been cool, where you had to have them snake around and jump off of multiple different ones in order to reach the top of the machine. So yeah, this video was fun to make, but it also was kind of sad because this game is so good and so unique, but it just didn't use that uniqueness for some fun boss battles. Instead, just some 4 Bowser Jr. boss battles that just weren't that great. But with that said, I wish Bowser Jr. was just, you know, put down as a mini boss or tower boss of each world. I think that would have easily fixed it, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. Hopefully Nintendo learns for next game to please incorporate some fun boss battles, and this is what we actually want. But let me know in the comments down below if there's any other really cool boss ideas that you have that you would have loved to see, whether it be another enemy or an enemy that I've already talked about, or maybe even a wonder event. So yeah, go ahead, take a random wonder event and talk about how a boss battle would have been fun with it. But make sure you leave a like and subscribe before you head out, and I will see you all on the next one. See you guys.